listen up. The most dangerous prison in recovery might not be the substance. It might be the identity people never escape. Welcome to the show where chains break, minds wake, and purpose takes its rightful place. We are jumping in today. We're stepping into dangerous territory. Not dangerous because of drugs, not dangerous because of alcohol. Dangerous because we're talking about identity. And identity controls everything. Yes, it does. Identity controls the way you think, the way you love, the way you sabotage things, the way you recover, the way you see yourself when nobody else is around. Identity. So, tonight's question is deeply controversial. Once an addict, always an addict? Some people believe absolutely yes, they are. Others strongly disagree. One side says, you never forget what addiction did to you. Stay humble, stay aware, stay vigilant. The other side says, if people keep identifying with bondage forever, they subconsciously stay emotionally chained to it. And today, we're going deeper than surface level recovery talk, folks. We're talking psychology, trauma, self-worth. We're talking faith. We're talking identity reconstruction. We're talking shame, and we're talking transformation. Because this conversation affects everything. Everything. Let me say this first before people misunderstand me. I respect recovery communities that save lives. I absolutely do. Millions of people have stayed alive because of meetings, accountability, honesty, and support systems. No questions asked. This episode is not an attack on people healing. It is not. This is a conversation about whether some people eventually outgrow the identity of a person that they used to be. And that matters. Because the human mind moves in the direction of identity, right? It's identity, then beliefs, then behavior. If a person deeply believes I'm broken forever, what behavior eventually follows? I'll ask that question. If someone believes, man, I destroy everything, how do they handle healthy relationships? If someone believes, man, no matter what I do, I'll always be an addict, what happens psychologically during moments of weakness? See, the question matters more than people realize. See, many people don't understand this. The brain protects the identity it believes belongs to you. Even unhealthy identities. That's why people sabotage healing. That's why people sabotage their peace. That's why some people relapse the moment life starts improving, because chaos becomes familiar. pain became familiar. Excuse me, because chaos became familiar, pain became familiar, struggle became familiar, and eventually being broken became familiar. You see, the street taught many of us survival. It didn't teach us how to heal. Poverty taught survival. Violence taught survival. Fatherlessness, trauma taught survival. Abandonment. But survival mode is not emotional freedom. Some of us learn how to numb pain before we ever learn how to process emotions. We learned alcohol before emotional regulations. We learned drugs before self-worth. Escape before healing. And eventually addiction stopped being something we did and became something we believed we were. And that's powerful and extremely dangerous. Now, let me balance this carefully. Some people listening right now are already uncomfortable. And honestly, that's good. That is a good thing. Some conversations should challenge people because healing requires reflection. All right? So now listen carefully. I understand why many people say, I'm an addict. For some people, that statement creates accountability. It reminds them, man, I can't play with this. I can't get arrogant. I know where addiction ends up leading me. And I respect that. I truly do respect that. But here's Coach Mikey Rowe's concern, all right? At what point does accountability become identity imprisonment? At what point does humility slowly turn into permanent shame? At what point does somebody stop introducing themselves by the worst chapter of their life? At what point? Imagine rebuilding your life for 15 years. Imagine rebuilding your life for 15 years, being faithful, being responsible, being transformed, being emotionally healthier, being a better father, a better mother, a better human being. And yet, the first thing attached to your identity is still addict. That affects some people deeply, especially people already struggling with shame. Because shame says, this is who you are. Conviction says, this is what you went through. There's a huge difference between that. One traps identity, the other acknowledges growth. And maybe this is why some people stay sober, but never become emotionally free. Because behavior changed, but their identity never did. They stopped drinking, but still secretly hate themselves. They stopped using, but still internally expect failure. They stopped escaping, but still believe they are damaged beyond repair. That internally, that internal belief system matters. See, repeated labels then turn into internal beliefs, then that turns into behavior patterns. The mind often follows the story repeated most often. This is just amazing once you learn it. I'm trying to simplify things for us, ladies and gentlemen. This is why I believe, Coach Mike believes, identity reconstruction is central to healing. It is extremely important. Not ego, not arrogance, not pretending addiction never existed, but transformation, real transformation. You see, when I gave my life to Jesus Christ, I didn't just need sobriety. I needed identity reconstruction, because alcohol wasn't the deep issue. It wasn't the deepest issue. Pain was. Trauma was. Self-hatred was. Fear. Inner city survival mentality. These were all the issues. See, the bottle, the alcohol was the escape. But eventually, I had to face the person underneath the addiction. That's the hard part that nobody talks about. Some people can stop using the substance, but still carry the same wounded identity. Still emotionally alive, but they're broken. They still sabotage themselves. They still run from intimacy. They still fear success. They still fear peace. Why? Why? Because internally, they never stopped identifying with chaos. And people unconsciously return to identities that feel familiar, even painful ones. Can we get more controversial? I think we can. Let's get more controversial. Some people become emotionally attached to being the struggling person. Not intentionally. They don't do it purposely. But psychologically they do. Because struggle became their normal. Pain became their personality. Brokenness became their emotional home. And healing feels totally uncomfortable. Healing feels so foreign because if you stop identifying as broken, now you have to rebuild something new. That responsibility scares many of us. It scares people, ladies and gentlemen. And listen, this is where faith changed everything for me. This is where faith changed everything for Coach Mikey Rowe. Because Jesus Christ did not simply tell me, manage your addiction forever. He didn't tell me that. He didn't tell me to manage it. He showed me transformation, renewal, restoration, purpose. The Bible talks about becoming new, not perfect, but new. And I think some people are terrified to believe they can truly become different because disappointment taught them not to trust themselves. Relapse taught them not to trust themselves. Failure taught them not to trust themselves. So they stay emotionally close to the old identity just in case. But what if healing requires eventually stepping into a new identity fully? What if freedom becomes limited when somebody forever introduces themselves through bondage? That's the real question. That is the real question. Now, before somebody twists my words, no, I do not believe people should become prideful. I do not believe that. No, I do not believe people should forget addiction exists. And no, I do not believe temptation disappears forever. Wisdom remembers, humility remembers, awareness remembers. But remembering your past is different than living inside it forever mentally. That's the difference. And maybe both sides of this debate are trying to protect people in different ways. One side protects people through vigilance. The other protects people through identity transformation. But I personally believe long-term healing requires more than fear of relapse. I believe it requires rebuilding identity completely. Because eventually people need a reason to live. Not just a reason not to use. That changes everything, ladies and gentlemen. Recovery is supposed to restore the human being, not only remove the substance. Some people have white knuckle sobriety. They've white knuckled sobriety for years, while internally, deep inside, they are miserable, still empty, still angry, still ashamed, still spiritually disconnected. That's not the fullness of healing. Healing means your mind changes, your relationships change, your emotional patterns change, your self-worth changes, your spirit changes, your purpose changes. And identity sits at the center of all of this change. Identity reconstruction equals, or the next step is mental renewal that leads to behavioral transformation. To the person listening tonight who feels trapped by your past, please hear me carefully. Your history matters. Your scars matter. Your testimony matters. But your worst season does not have to become your permanent identity. You're more than the overdose. You're more than the relapse. the prison sentence, the shame, the abandonment, and the addiction, there is still purpose underneath the pain. There's still value underneath all of that damage. There's still life underneath that survival mode. And maybe tonight, maybe right now, today, instead of asking, will I always be an addict? Maybe the deeper question becomes, who am I becoming now? Because healing is not just subtraction. It's reconstruction. It's not just removing the poison, removing the substance, but rebuilding identity. That's the work, ladies and gentlemen. That's the battle. That's the transformation. And if you're listening tonight, today, whenever, whatever time that you're listening to this, if you're listening and you're struggling with shame, please hear this clearly. I'm going to say this as clear as day. You're not disqualified because of your past. You're not beyond healing, and you're not permanently ruined. And you do not have to worship the identity of the person you used to be. God specializes in rebuilding people from ruins. I'm definitely living proof. So, welcome to the show where chains break, minds wake, and purpose takes its rightful place. And remember, healing starts with today's decision, folks. Another day, another blessing. Peace.